Hi there everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tip of the Week. So this week I thought I would take us into how to do lip sync in Toon Boom. So I'm going to show you here today in Harmony, but what I show you will also apply for Animate and Animate Pro. So you can use any of these professional products to do what I'm about to show you. So here I'm just going to work with the scene file that I've been kind of playing around with a little bit in these videos. It's just a little avatar of myself, but if I look in here, I've got my mouth layer, but I just have a couple of drawings. I have like a regular mouth drawing. I don't have any actual lip sync drawings in here. So the first step when you're going to do lip sync is to actually create the basic mouths that you're going to do when you're doing it. So I can select my mouth layer and go into the drawing view here, and now from here I can make my new mouths about the same size as the existing mouth that I have. And one thing to be aware of is there's a few things that you can do to help you kind of stay organized. I like to hit O down here to center on selection to get down to the mouth layer. And I do like to color code the mouth layer so that I can easily access it later. So you can color code it like any color that you want. Let's choose something a little bit lighter so that it's not in my way. But it just makes it easy to get to at a glance. I usually color code layers that I want to swap drawings on frequently. So mouths, hands are a good idea to color code. So now I have that smile drawing there on the first frame. And then I'm going to go onto the second frame of my drawing. And now here I'm going to create empty drawing, and create empty drawing now is just going to give me an empty drawing that I can work with, and I see a vertical line show up there, and I can turn on my onion skin so that I can draw my new drawing at about the same size as the previous one. Now when I'm doing this though, I want to kind of base my mouths off of a mouth chart, and so if you go up to help and help, then this will bring you to the help guide, and in Harmony you want to go into the stage user guide, but once you're in the user guide in either Animate Pro or Harmony, you want to go in the sound chapter and then under lip sync, and then if you just kind of scroll down here, this chart is the one that I like to use the most. I think it's a pretty good chart, so I'm just going to put this kind of like on the side, and I'll make my window here a little bit smaller, and I can kind of expand this side out so that I just can look at these two things at the same time. And then now I can use that as reference while I'm doing my drawings. So from here now, I can flip between the previous drawing and the next drawing using the comma and period, so comma and period. And when you do that, it just gives you the ability to kind of go back and forth. So I can go to the previous drawing, use D for dropper to select the color that I want to work with, and I can resize the size of my pen using the O shortcut. So that was D for dropper, and then O to resize the brush when I'm in the drawing view. And so as you can see, when you start to pick up some of these shortcuts, you can really facilitate the workflow. Now in this case, I actually do already have a mouth that I can use that's just my plain nothing's happening mouth. This is my A mouth. So I'm just going to leave that one in there. And then I can go on the next frame, create empty drawing, and I can now start to do something with this mouth. So I might want to do like a similar shape of mouth, because the B drawing is that similar shape, but the mouth just kind of slightly open. So now I can just open that mouth up a little bit. And now I can flip back and forth. I usually do like to flip back and forth while I do this to make sure that it kind of makes sense. So I can see I have a big line on that one, but I did the line all the way across on this one, so it's not going to match up really well. Sometimes what you might even want to do is actually select the line that you have from this one and then copy and paste it. So I can actually just copy that whole bottom piece, and then I can paste it in here. And I can even just get rid of that color if I want to. And then I can now use this line at the bottom, and I can move it down a little bit just using the shift and arrow keys to move it down. And then I can go in there and just kind of draw an invisible line. So if I go in with this is where you can start to use your stroke tool. If you hold down K, K will bring up the strokes view, which allows me to kind of draw an invisible stroke that I can use on my drawing. And then when I do that, the only thing to be aware of is that when your line is not connected to anything, it shows up with a yellow point. So I can see there that this line is not connected on either side because there's no overlap there in the line. And so if I really want to get in there, I can get in there and fix it, or I can simply kind of just, eyeball it and then, have it add a little section there. Looks like this line here, this pencil line, is kind of broken, so I'm just going to select that. Let me get my tool properties open here, which I have somewhere. Let's close all this stuff that I don't need. And then from within the tool properties of the pencil tool, you can merge those together into one line, and that's just going to make it way easier to work with. So now I can just save this. And so now if I go back to the previous drawing, I want to just take my paint bucket here, D for dropper to grab that color, next frame, and then I can paint that in. If it doesn't paint in, it's probably because there's a gap in there, so let's just close a small gap and paint it in. Beautiful. And then go back on the previous drawing, select that color, paint it in here. Now I don't have an inside of the mouth color yet defined for this character, I believe, so let's add a new color in there that we can make the inside of the mouth, and maybe it'll just be kind of a dark red or something, or some people even do it black. Paint that in like that. And then the nice thing about Toon Boom 2 is after you paint it in, you can go back and look and say, ooh, that color doesn't work very well. And then the other thing that you want to look at when you look at the mouth chart is you want to see, do I see teeth and tongue? So in the B mouth, I should be seeing some teeth and some tongue. So I actually don't want to paint that in yet because I want to kind of get the teeth and tongue in there before I paint it in. So I'll go back with my same line color there, and then I'll just make sure that I get a little bit of teeth showing and just a little bit of tongue. So as she opens her mouth, then I'll be able to see more and more of those extra things there. But just taking a look in here, I want to make sure that, let's expand my window out a little bit. I'm a little crunched. Okay, so let's just make sure that I have, looks like I do already have a teeth, so I can paint in those teeth, and I do not yet have a tongue. To make this easier, I'm just going to take this teeth and kind of drag it up so that I can see it next to the lips and so on, which I'm going to be painting with frequently. And I've got my outline color easily accessible, and then this is the new one that I added for the inside of the mouth color, which I'm going to label. Always a good idea to label your colors to make it easy to understand when you're working. So I can just double click on that and then call this inside mouth. And then now from here I can just add a new color. Oh no, I don't need a new color. I think oh no, I needed a tongue color. That's right. So this is going to be my tongue. And so what I will do, let's get this guy up there as well. And what the other thing that you might want to do is you might want to kind of like switch how you see these just to quickly reorder them. So you can switch between swatch mode or non-swatch mode, but it's just another one of those little tricks in your toolbox. So now I've got these as the same color right now, but what I can do is I can kind of paint in with it first, and then paint unpainted, and then I can just kind of drag, and then I can go back and change these to be the right color that I want to. So as long as you painted with the correct paint bucket, you can always go in there. So I can bring the value up on the tongue and make it a bit more, pink or whatever color it's going to be. It's kind of hard. I'm working with a bit of a muted palette there. Let's leave it like that. And inside mouth now, if I select this one, I might want to kind of like turn the saturation down a little bit. Something like that. Okay, so let's say that's working now. In this particular example, I do also have some interesting thickness on the lines. This is something where you could create a pencil template to save the thickness information to easily reuse it, or you can just kind of go and adjust it as you go. So, the nice thing is once you get the lip sync drawings done, you only have to kind of adjust it once. and then or create the drawings once, and then you're going to be reusing the same drawings over and over again. So now if I flip through these, this is looking pretty good here. I mean, maybe I'd want to have the upper lip kind of going up a little bit more, but you know, you can kind of play around with that. Of course, when I do that, I'm losing my fill because I'm adjusting where that is. And then I want to put my little highlights on the lips, which are in the outer corners, like that. And I can always adjust the size of my brush tool. I'm just using the brush tool for these highlights, and I'm using the pencil tool for the rest of the lines, because the highlights I don't necessarily want to adjust as I'm going. So I'm going to speed this up here while I do these drawings so that we can join me when I have all the drawings done. When you have a drawing like this one and this one where they're pretty similar, you can also kind of create the new one simply by duplicating the drawing. You can take your contour editor tool, which allows you to move around the points on the drawing, and then it looks like a white arrow there, and then you can actually just select the points that you want to move and then drag the points down. So to go between the C mouth and the D mouth, which is very, very similar, that might be something that's kind of enough to get you from that mouth to this one. And then you might just want to make some small tweaks to the rest of the drawing so that it doesn't look too mechanical, so you have a bit of an organic feel. So just kind of, you know, manipulating a little bit the way that the lines look there can go a long way. Now as I go into the E mouth, F mouth, G and X, E, the most important thing to realize is that sound, and the most important thing to realize is I don't see any teeth. It's just inside of the mouth and tongue. The F is that ooh sound, so it helps to have a good shape, and then you only see inside of mouth. And then the G is actually the F sound, so it's where you're kind of biting your lip, and the air is passing through that bitten lip. And then X really is that M, the M sound. So I often get asked, what's the difference between A and X? They look very similar. They're both kind of a closed mouth. Well, the A mouth, or sorry, the X mouth, I think I just got those the opposite. I did get them the opposite. I'm sorry. So the X mouth is your pure silence, and then the A mouth is your M. So in the case of when I have a mouth with lips, it will make a difference, and I'll show you that in just a minute when I get there. So in the case of a mouth like this, where it's kind of complicated and you actually do see the upper lip and the lower lip, this is where it becomes really clear what's going on with the lip sync, which is one of the reasons why I chose to use this style of mouth. Even though your mouth is probably going to be way more simple than this one, and it's probably going to be way more like the example in the user guide, showing you with the top and bottom lip really allows me to show you what happens with, for example, the F. So with the F here, if you kind of mimic it with your own mouth, when you do, your bottom lip is going inside. So because your bottom lip is not really being shown, then you're not going to see it, which is why you see my bottom lip here, which is quite prevalent in my in the rest of my mouth sequence. When I go to that F mouth, is going to disappear. There may be a small amount of it, in which case you could always just grab that color, and this is where you could go in, you just use your brush tool, put draw behind on, make your brush size pretty small, and then just put a small amount of color there showing, and then what the draw behind is going to do is when I let go of the mouse, it's just going to kind of slip it in behind everything else, and then I can still go in and take my contour editor and kind of just move it in there a little bit, and then that's what the final look is that I get. So I see a little bit of lip in there, but not a lot. So I'm just going to copy and paste the original mouth that I had before into the X position, because the X position is my silence position. And what I'm going to do, just to make this a little bit easier to understand as a flow, oops, and I realized I forgot to just put the line thickness on this one, so let me do that really fast. Something like this where you have two separate lines, it might be easier to just select the two lines that you're working with there and merge them together. And then you'll just have one set of points to deal with. And since I have some extra points here, I can just remove the ones that I don't need, you know, so that now I can just kind of add a point halfway in between and adjust it. Okay, so I'm going to leave this mouth here as my X mouth, and then I go back to the original X mouth and make this into my M mouth. So if you think about it, with an M, when you make that you're losing both of your lip shapes. So it's a little bit harder to show here, but what I'll just do is I'll delete the fills there, and then can even just delete that whole upper lip there. Get rid of those guys there, and then I might just do something where I kind of like flip this bottom lip around. Whoops, and I want to make sure I'm using my pencil tool. I'm kind of like, I like to mimic things as I do them, so forgive me for making noises here. And then, you know, you might want to just go in there and kind of adjust a little bit the thickness of the line. And then you can choose to do that same trick with the draw behind and the color, and just double check to make sure that you're putting the right one. So I'm just going to put this bottom lip color. You can put a little bit of that just kind of peeking in there from underneath. So usually that mouth, that M mouth, only shows for a split second when you're seeing the full animation. So it might be one of those things that you just kind of have to play around with. You might need a small amount of upper lip. So, you know, like if this is my upper lip, I might need a small amount of that here to make it look consistent. But you can kind of just play around with that and see what looks the best. I think it kind of looks good without anything, so we'll just try it like that. So now I've got all my lips set up, and if we want to double check it here with our mouth chart on the side, let's expand this out a little bit, make it a bit bigger. So I'm starting out with the M mouth, which is the A. Next I have the B, which is the open with the little teeth and tongue. Then I go to C, which is slightly open more. D, which is open even more. E, which is that sound. I've got the oo sound for the F. I've got the f sound for the G. And then I've got the generic silence for my X. Now, when I go and look at these drawings, though, if I look at them in my library, which I have open down here, Or if I look at them in my XSheet, which I can have open here, make this bigger, and I'll just select the drawings that I'm working on. I can find them in here. And if it's not showing in your XSheet, it might be because it's turned off. So turn it back on again. There we go. So when I look in my XSheet now, I see the way that the drawings are named. I can leave the drawings named like this, but it means that I have to remember the names of the drawings when I want to do lip sync. Or I have to manually do it by, looking at the drawing. I find it useful to relabel these drawings, and for my purposes I am going to relabel them to be the same thing as this chart here. I do sometimes see studios and stuff that will have a happy set of mouths and an angry set of mouths, in which case you might name them Happy A, Happy B, Happy C, or whatever your naming convention is. As long as you have a naming convention, you can always map to that. But to make it really easy, I'm just going to create the same stuff that we have here. So when you want to rename a drawing, don't just double click on the cell and type what you think is a new name. See, when I did that, it actually made my drawing disappear. When you double click in a cell and you type in something, it's not renaming the cell. It is saying replace this drawing with the drawing named A. So we have no drawing named A, so when I do that, if I say replace it with the drawing named A doesn't exist yet, so it's a blank drawing. So if before I got started I had populated a bunch of empty cells and then started to draw, that would have been fine. But since I didn't, I can just select the drawing, right click, and then do a drawing, rename drawing, which is Apple D or Control D, and then give it my new name. So this is now going to be A. So now if I simply go down, Apple D, B, and I can go down, Apple D. When I say down, I'm just using the down arrow, and that's working for me just fine. So I'm just double checking by looking while I'm doing it to make sure that I have the correct naming convention there from my chart. So that's why I kind of like to leave the chart open while I look at it, just to make sure. Now these ones at the bottom of the mouth chart here are just extra mouths. They have a couple of suggested ones, just a generic smile, which I have already in there, by the way, and then there's one that's an L. And so those extra mouths, so here's the one that I have is called smile. I could even just call this one Apple D. I could even just call it smile if I want. When you are going to put extra mouths in there, not a problem at all, but you are going to have to manually swap those extra mouths in. So I'll show you how to do that. But first, what I'm just going to do is, let's, for example, make an L mouth. So an L mouth is kind of the same shape as the C mouth, but you see the tongue coming in front of the teeth. And so let's just make a new drawing at the end. And so create an empty drawing. And or if I want to, by the way, I could do that double click thing. I can double click in there and I can call this extra dash L. Or I'm not allowed to put a dash, but I am allowed to put an underscore. So let's do that. Let's put extra underscore L. So I have an extra mouth that is my L mouth. Now to get in there and just kind of do this more quickly, I can go and grab one of the pre-existing mouths that I did, simply copy the drawing, go to the extra L one, paste it in, and then I can redo whatever I need to redo. So let's just empty out all that stuff inside. I can now grab the the pencil tool and the color that I need, and then I can just put the mouth or the tongue here in front. Sometimes you just have it L, sometimes you just have it touching the teeth like that. Some people have it go all the way up, but I think it kind of makes more sense just to have it touch the teeth, like so. And when I'm satisfied with that, then I can just go back in and grab the colors that I want. and paint those in. And I'm all set. So now I've got my full set. They're all named, and I have some extra mouths that I can go in and swap in when needed. Only thing I probably do different is I turn on my onion skin. My smile is kind of above everything else, so I might just want to yoink it down a little bit. But you know, that's not a big deal. You always deal with that when you're animating. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So now I've got all my drawings done. Save your file. Always save while you're working. And then now I can actually go in here and do some lip sync. So I've just kind of, for the moment, got all these mouths just kind of hopping in and out of here, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And my nose looks like it's really low on my character right now, so I can just pop that up a little bit, get it out of the way. And I just created a keyframe on that, so let me just put that, drag that keyframe back to the beginning because I want it to kind of always be up there. And some people, by the way, do also swap out the jaw at the same time as they swap the mouth. So you can do that as well, and then you get a more realistic looking mouth as you're opening it up. So that's looking pretty good. Now, if I want to actually do some lip sync, then what I should do is I should go in here and bring in a sound file. Now when you bring in the sound file, it shows up at the top of your timeline with a music note on it, and you can double click on the sound file to pop open the sound editor, and then you can play to hear it. Let's make sure my sound is on.
We need to get way higher.
It's a really weird voice to match with the avatar, but that's okay. We'll deal with that. And then I can, now I can right click on this and do an auto lip sync detection. So the first thing to do is to analyze the sound that you're working with and try to have it figure out some mouths. And just like our mouth chart that we worked with, we have the same 8 preset mouths, the A, B, C, D, all the way up to the X. And so if I do the auto lip sync detection, I will see right up here, I'm going to see a preview of how that worked.
We need to get way higher.
And so it does pretty good. I mean, it depends on the sound, the clarity of the sound, the accent of the person, you know, and how much background noise there is. The language that you're speaking doesn't really matter, because if you think about it, our mouths are an instrument. So if I make an ah sound, if I'm making ah in English or in French or whatever, it's still ah. So it's independent of language. However, if the person mumbles a lot, or if there is background noise, that could interfere with it. So I like to think it gets you about 70 to 80% of the way there. It depends on how polished you're trying to get it. So now I can just hit apply and close this guy. So far, if I go back in my scene, I haven't done anything. I still just have the mouths the way they are. I haven't applied those mouths to my character yet. All I've done is calculate on the sound file how the lip sync works. So the first thing to do is calculate how the lip sync works for that sound file, because it's based on the sound file, not on the drawings. If you think about it in this way, once you analyze the sound, you can map that sound to any set of drawings. So I can have a happy mouth set, I could have an angry mouth set, I could have different characters that are all clones of each other that have different looks, and then they, you know, like if you're working with those minions or whatever, and you have like a bunch of different minions, you can map the same sound to any set of drawings. So after I calculate the lip sync on the sound, I can just right click in the first cell on the sound layer and then go to lip sync and map lip sync. So just to clarify once again, I'm clicking on the sound layer, not on the mouth layer, because I'm saying take this sound and map the sound and the lip sync associated with the sound to a specific mouth layer. So now I'm going to go to map lip sync. From within here, now I see a window that allows me to map specific drawings. So I see the source layer. The source layer is the sound, we need to get way higher. The destination layer now, if you have named your drawings appropriately, it's going to be really easy. It's called mouth. But if you have named them drawing 1, 2, 3, 4, it's going to be really hard for you to find it, because Here, it's just all the drawings that are in your scene. So you need to have that labeled appropriately to be able to find it. And then if you have contained your mouth in a symbol, it becomes a little more complex. I don't recommend doing that. You know, like, if you don't need to put things in symbols, don't do it. You can have everything directly on the main timeline. There's no need for doing that. So here now, I can simply map to the mouth layer, and then I can go in here, and this is where it says, okay, on the mouth layer, which drawing do you need to go to get to the A mouth? Now, in my case, I actually went through that step of renaming my drawings. And that's why I did this, because after renaming the drawings, I can leave this exactly like this and it's fine. If you have a different naming convention, if you have like Happy A or Sad A or whatever, actually I know we don't allow dashes, so whatever your naming convention is, if you had named it something different, here is where you would fill in the different name that you have. But for me, I just have one set and I have named them the same thing, so I can just say, okay. And now when I do that, I'm going to see that it's going to be applied in here. So let's play it back and see how it did.
We need to get...
Oops, my scene file is actually too short. So let's just extend out the length of my scene. I've only got 60 frames showing and I've got way more sound than that. So, and I didn't turn my character on. So let's go back in here. And then I'm just going to make sure that I've got the length of the scene long enough. And by the way, when you're working in your playback toolbar, there are two sound icons. The sound one that just says sound will mute or allow sound for playback when you hit play. And then the scrubbing turns the sound on when you're scrubbing through with the playhead. So the whole scene ends around here, around 140. So let's bring it back there. And let's go to the last frame there, hit F5 to extend the exposure of my character on the character layer. There we go. So now we can play back.
We need to get way higher.
So it hasn't done terribly bad, actually. But now, after it's done the first pass, so after the auto lip sync does the first pass, is when you will go in and massage it to do whatever it is that you need to do. So the first thing is, I don't need that M mouth in there. That kind of came in because of some static. So let's select our mouth layer and hit O in the timeline to zoom into the selection. And I can actually just drag that frame there or drag that drawing all the way over. Or you can take your library substitution window here and just actually swap into the mouth that you're looking for. So I'm looking for the X mouth still. So I can just swap that one in. And when you swap a drawing, it's going to swap it up until the next tick. So since I just swapped it, it swaps it all the way up until this frame here. And then this is happening a little too soon, so I can just kind of drag it over. Let's just turn this, I've got my drag mode right now in keyframe mode, so let's just turn it to drawing mode only, so that I'm just dragging the drawings. And I want to have that happen a little bit faster. And then I need an extra drawing here that's not in there. So that is a lot more similar to, where to go? Oh, I don't have one that's a good mouth for that. So the sound is a lot like the F, but without the bottom lip being sort of enclosed in the mouth. So for the sound, you really want one that's just kind of open, but is only teeth. So this is another one of those extra mouths that you might want to add in. So let's just take, I'll swap in this mouth here. I can create an empty, or duplicate the drawing actually is going to be faster. So let me just duplicate this drawing. And the reason it's looking kind of funny on here is because I have a deform on this guy. So I just want to turn that off because it's deforming the mouth in a funny way. Let's turn that off so it's not interfering with what I'm doing for the moment. And so I want this new mouth to be the So let's go back into the drawing view just to look at it on its own. So what this one is going to be is if we take away everything except the teeth is basically what this is. So let's take everything out, and then I can take my contour editor and just kind of like smush this whole thing up here. And I can just get rid of that point. And then I'm just going to fill this in with the tooth color. And if I want to, I can also go into my XSheet here. So you see it's named this one 1 because I don't have a drawing that's called 1 yet. So I'll do that rename drawing thing, and I'll call this extra. And I'll just put an N there because it's that sound. So back to the beginning here.
We need to get way higher. 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 We need to get way higher.
So you see, after only spending a couple of minutes on that,
We need to get way higher.
I have a really nice looking lip sync. And so the majority of it is coming in from that auto lip sync, and then I can just go through on 1 or 2 passes and double check to see how it's looking. As you need to, you can add extra drawings. So, you know, you might even need to add extra drawings when you have different facial expressions. Like, you know, if she's going to be really surprised, like, wow, like she needs a new mouth for that. Don't hesitate to add new mouths when you need to. But to make it easier for yourself, definitely follow some kind of naming convention. So that's it for this week. Hopefully that tip of the week was useful for those of you who are doing lip sync. And don't forget that if you need to, you can also swap out the jaw when you're swapping out the mouth. Some people include the jaw and the mouth in one layer, or you can have the jaw, for those of you in Animate Pro and Harmony, you could have the jaw in the, for example, the color art layer, and you could have the mouth in the line art layer, and then you can do some things separately with those. And I could go over that in advanced, tip of the week later. But hopefully that gives you some inspiration and ideas and where to run with, and I will see you in another tip of the week. Take care.